Imagine, just for a second, that you are making a massive high-stakes decision.
Right.
You do everything right. You gather all the data, you eliminate the variables, and your pros and cons list is just absolutely bulletproof.
The dream scenario.
Exactly. The spreadsheet checks out perfectly.
Yeah.
So you take this flawlessly logical plan, you present it to your team or, maybe your partner or your kids, and it totally bombs.
Yeah.
They hate it. They dig their heels in, and you're just left standing there totally bewildered, holding a perfect spreadsheet that literally no one cares about. Why does that happen?
Well, it happens because we constantly confuse a sound argument with a transformative one. We kind of assume that human beings are just these organic calculators. And, if you input the right data, you automatically get the right behavior. But the sources we're looking at today for this deep dive, they open with a quote from Simon Sinek that just shatters that illusion.
Oh, right, the Sinek quote.
Yeah. He says, "The mind can be convinced, but the heart must be won."
That distinction is everything. I mean, winning the mind definitely does not guarantee winning the heart.
Not at all.
And that gap, that space between what we rationally know to be true and what we actually feel and execute in our daily lives, that's the fault line running beneath almost every human failure.
Yeah, that's incredibly well said.
So welcome to this custom-tailored deep dive. For you listening right now, our mission today is to explore a really profound personal document we've received. It's a reflection simply titled Day 111.
Day 111, right?
Yeah, and it attempts to bridge that exact gap between rational knowledge and lived experience. And it's quite the read.
Oh, it's a fascinating piece of writing. The author essentially pulled together this completely unlikely dinner party.
Yeah.
You've got Stoic philosophers, ancient generals, Russian novelists, and football coaches.
Quite the mix.
Right, all viewed through the lens of someone just sitting alone with a journal, 111 days, into a really deep personal commitment.
And to help us navigate this, the materials came with a really brilliant visual. It's this thematic map detailing the architecture of the entire philosophy.
The map is super helpful.
It is. We're going to explore three core themes here. Attention, the tension between love and force and time. But these aren't just isolated self-help concepts, right? They are interconnected gears.
Yeah.
So, okay, let's unpack this. Starting with attention.
Right.
Looking at this map, attention isn't just the first topic. It's the foundational mechanism that even makes the other gears turn.
Because it's literally the prerequisite for reality. Without it, the rest of the map just collapses.
Totally.
The sources ground this in a warning from Epictetus, the Stoic philosopher who lived a couple thousand years ago.
Yeah.
He warns that when you let your attention slide, you can't just trick yourself into thinking you'll snap it back whenever you feel like it. He says that because of today's mistake, everything that follows is necessarily going to be worse.
I mean, that sounds incredibly severe. If I zone out for 5 minutes, my entire future is ruined.
Well, Epictetus isn't really talking about perfectionism here. He's talking about the biological mechanics of habit.
Oh, okay.
And this is where modern neuroscience completely validates ancient Stoicism. We often think of attention as a battery. You drain it, you take a nap, it recharges.
Right.
But it actually functions much more like a muscle. When we look at neuroplasticity, the rule is neurons that fire together wire together.
Ah, I've heard that.
Yeah. So when you let your mind drift, you aren't resting. You are actively training your brain to become highly efficient at being distracted.
So you're literally building the muscle of inattention.
Precisely, which is the exact opposite of what we want. In Winifred Gallagher's book, Wrapped, which is cited in our stack.
Great book.
Yeah, really good. The cognitive scientist David Meyer makes this point practically irrefutable. He notes that Albert Einstein didn't invent the theory of relativity while he was, multitasking at the Swiss Patent Office.
Right. The insight didn't come from flooding his brain with more input, or checking his telegrams every 5 minutes.
Exactly.
The theory of relativity required him to hold incredibly complex, competing variables in his head simultaneously. He needed that sheer, unfragmented processing power that only comes from deep, sustained attention.
Yeah, that sustained focus is key.
It actually reminds me of the concept of frozen thinking, mentioned in The Magic of Thinking Big. The book says, nothing grows in ice.
Oh, that physical metaphor is perfect. A frozen mind simply cannot absorb anything new.
Right. It's like a smartphone with a completely full storage drive.
Yeah.
You can try to download all the newest, most amazing apps, or, in this case, you can read all the greatest philosophical ideas in human history.
Right.
But your device literally cannot process or absorb them until you intentionally delete the junk. You have to unfreeze the device, clear out the distraction, just to have the empty space required to learn.
And clearing that space requires a very specific kind of discipline. The sources trace this progression through a quote by Brian Herbert. He points out that the capacity to learn is a gift. You're born with a certain baseline.
Sure.
The ability to learn is a skill you develop over time. But the willingness to learn, that is a choice.
I love that. Capacity is given, ability is built, but willingness is a daily decision to actually, put the phone down.
Exactly. It has to be chosen every single day because distraction will always present itself as the path of least resistance.
Always.
And the legendary football coach Vince Lombardi is brought in here to make the physical equivalent of Epictetus's mental warning.
Okay.
Lombardi famously said, "Practice does not make perfect, only perfect practice makes perfect."
Right, because if you're just repeating a mistake over and over, you're not gaining mastery.
No.
You're just getting really, really good at doing it wrong.
Mm.
An unfocused mind thinking about the same problem 1,000 times doesn't become wise. It just becomes efficiently confused.
Yeah, it just entrenches the error.
Let me push back on this, though.
Sure, go ahead.
Because when we talk about folks, stopping the multitasking, getting our frozen minds working, isn't optimizing our attention just a modern productivity hack?
Ah.
Like, it sounds like we're just trying to achieve inbox zero for our brains so we can be better, faster workers.
Well, that is the modern trap. We've commodified attention. We treat it as merely an economic tool to get, more emails sent.
Right.
But the sources completely reframe this using William Wilberforce, the 18th century abolitionist.
Okay, what does he say?
Wilberforce elevates attention from a life hack to a profound ethical obligation. He says, "You may choose to look the other way, but you can never say again that you did not know."
Wow. So choosing to look away removes our defense of ignorance.
It completely removes our alibi.
Yeah.
Wilberforce is saying that inattention is not a passive accident. It is an active moral failure.
That's heavy.
It is. What we notice dictates what we care about, and what we care about dictates how we treat people. If you choose to numb out and scroll through your phone while your kid's trying to tell you about their day, that isn't a productivity issue. That is a moral choice to withhold your presence.
Yeah.
Attention is fundamentally a moral act.
And man, if attention is a moral act that dictates what we notice,
Mm,
then the way we process what we notice really defines our actions toward others.
absolutely.
And that drops us right into the second major theme on our map,
Mm.
the tension between love and force.
This is where it gets tricky.
Very. Because once we are paying attention to the people around us, we have to decide how we are going to deal with them.
And this is where the philosophy gets tested in the real world. Because the sources, they acknowledge a very hard truth here.
Yeah.
The world does not run on love alone. There are bad actors. There are real threats.
The text definitely doesn't shy away from the darker, cynical side of reality. It brings in Robert Greene, who draws on Sun Tzu's The Art of War and Kautilya's ancient text, the Arthashastra.
Yep.
And their argument for the use of force is just blunt. I mean, Sun Tzu basically says you have to crush your enemy totally.
It sounds brutal, but let's look at the mechanism behind it. Kautilya warns that the remnants of an enemy act like a disease or a fire.
Meaning,
Meaning if you don't extinguish it completely, it comes back.
right. To bring that down to earth for a second, think about a truly toxic coworker who is, actively trying to sabotage your career. Or maybe even a destructive habit you are trying to quit.
That's a great example.
If you only half defeat them, they don't magically become your friend. They become embittered. They stay hidden.
Yes.
Showing mercy at the wrong time isn't actually kind. It's just setting yourself up for a delayed catastrophe.
Right.
Greene argues that with some enemies, it honestly only pays to be merciless.
Right. Although Greene does provide a bit of a corrective,
Hmm.
he knows you have to judge your enemies carefully because sometimes it's actually best to convert them into an ally.
Okay.
The operative word in all of this is discernment.
Right. But here's where it gets really interesting.
Oh, yeah.
Because sitting directly across the table from Sun Tzu and Robert Greene are voices of equal authority arriving at the exact opposite conclusion.
The contrast is wild.
We have Leo Tolstoy in his Calendar of Wisdom, and he says it is a fundamental mistake to think you can safely address a person without love.
Tolstoy draws a very sharp boundary here. He says you can work with objects without love.
Right.
You can cut wood, bake bricks, hammer iron, and your emotional state doesn't really matter to the wood or the iron.
Sure.
But you cannot work with people without love.
He uses this incredible metaphor about bees.
Yes, the bee.
If you approach a beehive without care, you aren't just hurting the bees, you are going to get stung.
Exactly.
It's a structural reality of human psychology.
Right.
If you approach a person coldly, like an object to be managed, their natural psychological defense mechanisms just flare up. They sting you back.
They absolutely do.
Inattentive engagement with living things causes avoidable damage.
Because love, in Tolstoy's view, isn't just a fleeting, warm emotion. It is a form of deep attention.
There's that word again.
Right. It is the practice of recognizing the humanity in front of you. Albert Einstein echoed this, actually, calling love the most powerful force there is because it has no limits.
Yeah.
And of course, the text cites the core commandment in John 15:17 to just love one another.
But okay, hold on. As the reader, I'm looking at this thematic map and I am completely stuck.
Oh, so?
On one side, we have Sun Tzu saying, crush your enemy totally so the fire doesn't spread. On the other side, we have Tolstoy and Einstein saying, you can never engage with people without love.
Right.
How do we hold both of those ideas without our brains short-circuiting? I mean, are we just supposed to guess which one applies on any given Tuesday?
It feels like an impossible paradox, doesn't it?
Totally.
But the synthesis provided in the sources comes from Jordan Peterson, and it bridges this gap perfectly.
Okay, what does he say?
Peterson argues that the ultimate enemy, he uses the archetype of Satan, must be fought within the battleground of our very own soul.
Wait, so the enemy isn't the person sitting across from me?
Exactly. Think about how this manifests in everyday life. Have you ever felt a surge of, righteous justice during an argument?
Oh, definitely.
Maybe you're honking aggressively at someone in traffic, or you're about to send a scorching, merciless email to a colleague, and you tell yourself, I'm just being like Sun Tzu. I'm crushing the enemy.
Right.
But in reality, you're just reacting from your own unhealed wounds. The inner enemy is our own anger masquerading as justice. It's a cruelty we try to justify as strength.
So the resolution between force and love isn't like a 50-50 compromise. It's a hierarchy.
That is the crucial distinction. Love is the frame. It is the ultimate orientation and purpose.
Okay.
Force is merely a tool that exists within that frame. Force should only be deployed with extreme discernment when love alone cannot protect what needs to be protected.
And if you get that hierarchy backwards, it's a complete disaster.
Absolute disaster.
The text quotes the poet Percy Bysshe Shelley, who says the worst mistake ever made in this world was the separation of political science from ethics.
Yep.
When strategy divorces itself from love, when power forgets what it is actually for, it becomes its own kind of enemy. We just end up fighting the wrong wars.
Which is exactly why we have to fight the enemy in ourselves first, ensuring our motives are grounded in love before we go out trying to conquer the world.
I see where you're going.
Yeah.
But let's ground this in reality for a minute.
Sure.
It is very easy for us to sit back in comfortable chairs and say, use moral attention and make sure love is the frame for force.
It sounds great on paper.
It sounds beautiful. But human beings panic under pressure. How do we actually execute this when we are constantly rushed, stressed, and constrained by the ticking clock of our own lifespans?
Yeah, that's the real challenge.
Because time is the ultimate bottleneck to love. Which brings us to the third and final theme on our map, time.
And time puts the previous two themes to the ultimate test. The sources bring in Marcus Aurelius here, which is perfectly fitting because he was, the ultimate stressed-out leader.
The Roman emperor. I mean, he was governing an empire, fighting plagues,
Yeah.
managing wars he didn't even want, dealing with betrayals.
Yeah.
The sheer velocity of his daily life must have been absolutely crushing.
Yet in his private journal, what we now know as Meditations, he writes about finding solid ground.
Right.
He reminds himself that the frame of our lives, whether we live 5 years or 100 years, it's not ours to set. We are invited in by nature, and eventually we will be sent away.
He recognized what he actually controlled. The timeline isn't ours, but everything inside the timeline is.
Exactly.
He says we make the timeline the right one by embodying goodness within it and, making our exit with grace.
Yes.
But I have to challenge this.
Okay, let's hear it.
What if the world is actively demanding our immediate action?
Right.
The text quotes an African proverb. No matter how long the night, the dawn will break. That implies the structure of the universe is out of our hands. But when you are sitting in the dark and things are falling apart, your business is failing, or there's a family crisis, doesn't urgency demand that we rush? Panicking feels like the only responsible reaction.
Well, it feels responsible because rushing gives us the illusion of control.
Oh.
But this raises an important counterintuitive truth. The sources answer your question with a brilliant Spanish proverb, despacio voy porque deprisa estoy, which translates to, I go slowly because I am in a hurry.
Wait, I go slowly because I am in a hurry. Unpack the mechanism there, because that sounds completely backward.
It is the paradox of speed. When you rush, your biological stress response kicks in.
Right, fight or flight.
Yeah. Your vision literally narrows. Your brain shuts down its creative problem-solving centers just to focus on immediate survival.
Yeah.
Rushing creates a kind of blindness.
Wow.
When the destination truly matters, every single step has to be taken with care, because one mistake caused by panic will cost you 10 times as much time to fix.
That makes a lot of sense.
Mother Teresa is quoted here making the exact same point. She said that without patience, we see less, we feel less, we hear less.
So trying to do more through sheer speed usually results in less. You're moving so fast you can't actually see the reality of the situation you're trying to fix.
Exactly. And the text connects this to a collective modern experience we all share, the early days of the pandemic.
Oh, yeah.
The Daily Stoic reflection points out that during the lockdown, people suddenly felt like they had more time.
Yeah, everyone was baking bread and reading.
Right. But the hours in the day hadn't multiplied. We still only had 24 hours.
True.
What happened was that choices narrowed. The superficial, inessential obligations were forcefully stripped away, leaving only what was essential.
And as Marcus Aurelius constantly asked which of these things actually matters, by eliminating the junk, we gained clarity.
And practically speaking, clarity is time. The author Simon Sinek makes this point about leadership. Leaders are supposed to go first and pave the way. But they can only go first if they know where they are going. And they can only know where they are going if they have cultivated enough stillness, presence, and attention to actually see the path.
So what does this all mean?
Yeah.
If we step back and look at this entire journey, from Epictetus and Wilberforce to Sun Tzu and Tolstoy, all the way to Marcus Aurelius, it all funnels down to the synthesis block on our thematic map.
It really does.
Attention multiplied by love, multiplied by time.
They are gears of the exact same machine. Attention is a profound moral act that dictates what we notice.
Right.
Love is the structural law of human engagement. It's the frame we must use to process what we notice. And time isn't a resource we manage by rushing. It's a given frame.
Yeah.
Whether everything we do matters or doesn't matter depends entirely on what we bring into that frame.
Which brings us full circle to the Simon Sinek quote we started with and the context of this document being written on day 111.
Yes.
Sinek said, the mind can be convinced, but the heart must be won. We've just spent this deep dive walking through the logic. For you listening, your mind probably understands it. You can logically agree that attention matters, love is essential, and urgency demands patience. The spreadsheet checks out.
It checks out perfectly, but the moment you take your headphones off, it is incredibly easy to go right back to scrolling on your phone, getting into petty arguments, applying half-hearted mercy, and panicking over an email.
Totally.
Because the heart is harder. Winning the heart isn't about hearing a flawless argument, it's about practice.
And that is what Day 111 represents. It's not a document written by someone who has achieved perfect glowing enlightenment and is just preaching from a mountaintop.
No, not at all.
It's written by someone who is still showing up, still practicing.
Still trying one day at a time through imperfect repetition to make their mind and their heart say the exact same thing.
Yeah.
That daily commitment to actually paying attention, actually loving, and actually slowing down, that is the whole project of living well.
It really is. So we want to leave you with a final thought to mull over as you go about your day, building on everything we've talked about. If clarity is practically the same thing as time, and if directing your attention is a profound moral act, what is one thing in your life right now that is disguised as an urgent emergency, but is actually just a distraction keeping you from doing the essential work with love?
Wow. It's a question worth slowing down for.
It absolutely is. Thank you for bringing such a rich, thought-provoking stack of sources to the table for this deep dive. Until next time, take care and take your time.